6 o'clock.
Yes.
Yep.
And this
And
this is the
anybody else?
welcome to the sixth. Yes, we have some other persons on there.
Okay, good, good.
Welcome to the sixth Constitutional Convention Standing Committee on Culture and Heritage. My name is Alicia M. Wells. I am the chair. In attendance, we have Delegate Member Lydia Hendricks, the vice chair, Delegate Member Devin Carrington, Delegate Member Ronald E. Russell, and Delegate Member Akima Richardson. We're happy to be able to continue with this second podcast of the Culture and Heritage Standing Committee. We've had a lot of readings that were sent to us, offered to us, many emails and contributions from members of the community, and I'm happy to have received those. Today, we should have with us, joining us later, Dr. Malik Sekou, who's going to offer his take, uh, evolving from the Fifth Constitutional Convention and leading up to the sixth, and what we could hope that we will have to be able to present come October of 2025. We know that we've been charged with, as the Culture and Heritage Standing Committee, to review the proposal from the Fifth Constitutional Convention, Article 9, which is on education, Article 14, which is on culture, Article 15, protection of the environment. And last time we met on the 24th of April, we had a robust discussion on ancestral and native Virgin Islanders. And as I was perusing information that came to me from the Fifth Constitutional Convention and what was said when it was proposed and sent to Congress, there's certain passages of that was not um, okay because it was contrary to United States Constitution. So those are some things that we have to look at uh, today. Delegate Hodge, thank you very much, and I know that we're going to meet at a later time. Welcome, I should say first, and we are going to um, talk about the preamble. So, Delegate Hodge, do you have anything first to offer about the preamble that we should have as an opening salvo for this Culture and Heritage Committee meeting?
I don't have nothing in concrete, but I do think preambles are very important because it's usually the first thing that people read
Yes,
in the Constitution. So we have to make sure that it is relevant for years to come, and make sure that it's a powerful, I guess, title statement for this Constitution. Um, so I'm looking forward to seeing the input the other delegates have on this in this space, and it's definitely something that we need to make sure it's properly drafted.
correct. Do you know where we are with the suggestion that we would all meet as not a plenary session, just committees to develop language so that we can go forward for a June submission and to the standing committee? Do you know where we are with that?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, right? If you look at the rules stated that each standing committee had a responsibility to vote on the language that was assigned on it and either accept or deny, right? Once
Yes.
it's accepted, it goes up to the executive committee for it to be noted and then sent down to the greater delegation, right? Anything that's denied, then the committee is responsible of redrafting or deleting or modifying that language. From what I'm understanding, right? Because there's no true structure on how each standing committee is supposed to be ran, right? A lot of the standing committees are right now in like a, I like to say I'm a lawyer, so I'm using the discovery phase of this, right? Where we're getting information, we're asking our constituents and Virgin Islanders to give the input, having these conversations so we can actually draft and adopt and accept the delete language from the fifth draft. Um, so there are some plans from the EPI to have those town hall meetings where all 15 delegates are there and we're accepting questions and we're educating the populace on the Constitution, the constitutional process, the sixth constitutional convention, the timelines, who we are. But the drafting really supposed to happen, in my opinion, and based on the rules, independently, and then brought to the standing committees to have those conversations and votes.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Hendricks, are you on? I'm not seeing you. Yes, I'm hearing you now. Yes. Can you hear us?
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, good. And I can hear you. Can every other person online hear?
Yes, I can. I can hear her.
Oh, great. Okay. Delegate Carrington, I know
Yes,
we've
ma'am.
gotten a lot of emails and texts and a volume amount of paperwork. Do you have anything that you'd like to add about what we're doing, our mandate, and how we're going
Who was
forward
that?
with this?
I just want to comment on the preamble. I agree largely with what Delegate Hodge said, and I think the preamble sets the tone for what is to follow in the articles below. It's like an intent statement. It's like it sets the intent of the writers of the Constitution. So whatever we write in the preamble whatever we write below in the articles has to harmonize with what's in the preamble. And so I'm looking forward to contributing to that process to make sure that we do have harmony between the preamble and the articles below.
Thank you. Delegate Hendricks, you were saying something? Okay, I'm not hearing her. Delegate Hendricks? Okay. Continuing, I know there's going to be an education phase also, and that too is set up by the executive committee once they've gotten all of the revisions and suggestions from the various committees, and that will be the education portion will probably take part in June. Delegate Hendricks? Okay, I don't see or I don't hear Dr. Malik Sekou. So continuing on until he gets on, we had, like I said, we had robust discussion on culture and what culture meant and the various cultures that have assimilated into the Virgin Islands culture. I guess we're on the right track because on everything I've been reading on Facebook and the other mediums, everything is talking about our culture, what we do, and how we say something, and our meanings, and how the meanings are somewhat similar depending on the area that we're in. Because I remember looking at something on Facebook from one of the other Caribbean islands, and it was saying if you've never met or been in conversation with a person from a Caribbean island, once they've said something, and especially it was speaking about husband and wives, when if the wife just said, and that could mean a whole lot of things. And the person was saying, be careful how you respond to your significant other when you say something to them and they just say, that no words but just that sound. I know that being Caribbean, we're very good at talking without saying words. And I remember as an instructor, and the students would always tell me that I liked the male better than the females, because when you tell a male to go sit down, he's going to sit down, and 5 minutes later he's going to be at your desk asking something. The female, they're going to move their heads around like a kippy doll, and they won't speak to you for the rest of the semester unless you make them speak to you, because you have to verbalize in the class. Let me hear some comments on that what I just said. And Member Hendricks, I'm looking forward to hearing. We're not hearing you. Member Carrington, would you like, or Delegate Rudell Hodge, would you like to say something regarding that?
You can hear me, Miss Wells?
Yes, I can now.
Miss Wells?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes. I'm seeing you and I'm hearing you.
Me?
I am hearing you.
No, yes, I said I concur with you. I always like boys, even men. You'll notice I will gravitate towards men quicker than I will gravitate towards the females.
Right.
And as you said,
you're fading. And now you're frozen. And I'm not hearing.
And even in my household,
She has a bad connection, it seems.
Yes,
my boy.
If you could repeat that. Can you repeat that? I see your mouth moving, but we're not hearing.
Huh?
I see your mouth moving, but we're not hearing. Member Carrington, would you like to weigh in on that?
You know, I mean, yeah, nonverbal communication is part of our culture. We do it, whether it be by head movement or hand movement or body movement or eye movement, and it's something that, you know, we pass on from generation to generation. It's something we want to preserve. Let's see how we can incorporate language in our constitution to make sure that we safeguard and preserve that type of communication.
Thank you. Delegate Hodge?
I think, yeah, it's, you know, Caribbean people and VI people really do have a way of speaking, a way of expression that is
I guess
very
he's not
unique.
hearing you either.
Can you hear me?
Delegate?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I'm talking. Can you not hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, perfect. So as I was stating, you know, it is very much true that, you know, people from the Caribbean, especially the Virgin Islands, have a very unique way of expressing themselves, right? And that's both verbal and non-verbal communication. And it's also becoming a lost art as we have become more Americanized and global influences have penetrated into the Virgin Islands diaspora. So it's definitely going to be interesting thought experiment to realize or figure out a way how to protect those things in a constitution.
Also, we have certain body movement. And I don't mean the walking apart, because if you're Caribbean, I believe everybody knows how to walk. I mean how we would like make our mouths or shift our shoulders. I always call it when my mom used to sit in the car and rustle up herself like a chicken when it's trying to settle itself on a nest of eggs. And you know that either meant that she was in a good mood, she was going to say something to you that you probably don't want to hear, or just leave her alone, let her settle herself. So I could read that rustling up that she would do when she sat in the vehicle on the passenger side. Because you know, although they sat on the passenger side, at least my parent, never drove a car, but would always tell you about driving and stopping and all of that. So those are some things that I've noticed. And my grandmother, although she lived a larger part of her life on um, Tortola and then in New York, she hardly spent any time in the Virgin Islands. That she had the same thing when she would be walking in the street or just sitting in the car or whatever. She would just shift herself around like she's settling on some eggs or something, like a big chicken going to settle the eggs down. And I remember that as a young person because I spent a lot of time with her in New York. I also noticed that the pipe, and I noticed the bambula dances, especially on the day when we have the day when the coal workers strike and the bambula dances, that she had this pipe. My grandmother, my mother, I don't remember ever seeing her smoking, but my grandmother had a pipe. And the only time she would be smoking this pipe would be 4-day morning, for example, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, around that time. And I think it was when there was something heavy on her mind. She would get up in the middle of the night and she would have her little lunch box, those little metal lunch boxes that we had to take lunch to school, those of us who had to take lunch. And she would get her tobacco out of there and fill up her little piece of pipe and cross her ankles and smoke a pipe. And that was the only time she would smoke. So nobody else would know that she was a smoker, except I knew because I shared a bed with her. So I think those are some things that I never asked her what she was doing because you don't ask grown people why they're doing something as a child. You learn not to do that. In fact, when neighbors came to your mother's house, you had to make yourself scarce and go outside. You can't stop your ears from hearing, but you couldn't be within the vicinity of the adults. So I would never ask anything, but I deduce over time that was where she probably had something weighing on her mind, and then she would get up in the middle of the night or 4-day morning and smoke a pipe to settle herself because she would smoke it for like, I guess 10, 15 minutes, close up her lunch box or lunch kit where she kept the tobacco leaves and everything. And then she would come back to bed. How many of you have had that same experience with someone in your family, whether male or female, with that pipe smoking? And no one else knew because they didn't smoke anyplace else except in their bedrooms 4-day morning.
Hi, Delegate Wells. Good
Hi,
night.
how are you? Welcome.
I'm good. To answer your question, I've never seen any family member smoking in that sense.
Mhm.
But I am wondering, was it like a frowned upon thing to do back then? Smoking?
I don't. Well, it was frowned upon because you never saw people in the street smoking. I remember seeing my dad smoking a Camel cigarette, and I think that I saw it. You know how the gut will come down, and the Camel didn't have a filter on it, which I found out was a filter after because I didn't know anything about cigarettes. But when I saw that the paper opened up and all these, I guess it was tobacco was coming out to me, it was gross. So I never smoked anything. I can't speak for my brother because you can't put your hand in the fire for anybody, a good West Indian saying. And so I don't know if he ever smoked. I know he smoked marijuana because he told me Ja told him to do that. And he told the judge that too. But I think you're probably right, Member Richardson. It was frowned upon to smoke. But even in her house where she lived, my grandma, I never saw her smoke. The only
Well,
time she would smoke would be in the morning early.
in that case, I think it's interesting. You mentioned two things now that you couldn't do back then. Or let me not say you couldn't do, that were frowned upon. The first one being questioning your parents or your grandparents.
True.
And the second one being smoking, I guess, out in the open. Because maybe it was considered, something is wrong with that person. He must be going through something. He or she must be going through something.
Yes. Oh, we would always see the person going out of their head or they're having what having the fits or something, and really it was probably some kind of sickness. But we just had these names for all these things. And as a child in Savannah, I remember this lady. She sold candy in jars on the step. And those of you who live elsewhere, is the stoop or whatever. We know it's a step, and the step is across the gutter, and the gutter runs under the step. The gutters never smell. That's one thing. They used to wash them down all the time, so you didn't smell gutter. And she would get I guess, an attack. And we would say, oh, she has the fits, but come to find out, that's just the word we gave for it, the fits. And it wasn't a medical name for that. She probably had some kind of medical
Like a seizure or something.
seizure, but we would always say, oh, she
Okay.
gets the fits.
The fits.
Yes.
Some
And I
people
remember
still
that.
do that. They still do that. They give things nicknames, even though
Yes.
it might not be the proper name. It's just something everyone knows it as. Like I've heard in St. Thomas, we call the ice pop a special. When in St. Croix, they call it something totally different. It's a cup with a frozen juice.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have the milk, the sour sap, the passion fruit. And in St. Croix, they call it something totally different, but I don't recall.
Delegate Carrington, what do you call a special in St. Croix?
Lindy.
Lindy.
Yes,
Is
a
in
Lindy.
Nevis? I thought I heard that in Nevis when I went there, Lindy. Remember Hendricks? I'm not getting her at all.
And
I've
we
known it
we
to be a
we also have a something similar called a freco.
Oh, Franco is when you shave the ice, though.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, but the special is where you have like the Kool-Aid or lemonade or
Yeah, we don't call it Lindy.
soursop or whatever, and you put that in the cup, yeah,
We don't call it Lindy.
and you freeze it. So, Delegate Hart, do you know about a Lindy or a special? I'm just calling on you because I know you're a youngin.
I definitely do know what a special is. My grandmother, my great grandmother, Miss Tessa Mark, was a special woman in Estate Thomas and a baker. So
Okay.
that's something that runs in the family. So we definitely know what that is.
Okay. Something we needed to and I made a note of from our last meeting on first meeting on the 24th was that the identity of our people. And I guess that keeps coming up almost in all of the standing committees I have been attending. And we keep hearing about status. That's a big thing. Everyone is asking about, should we have status before constitution or vice versa? And I know we had some persons who sent information in on what they thought should come. It's like the chicken or the egg. And for those persons who were not able to be present at our last meeting, what is your take on the status or constitution? Or do you have an opinion as to what route we should take as a sixth constitutional convention? Anyone can start. It's usually said, if you don't know where you're from, you don't know where you're going. And I guess that's the roadmap that some persons have on St. John. And particularly, I know that especially the younger persons who came to some of our meetings who would send in information spoke about ancestral Virgin Islander compared to even getting anywhere about status or constitution. What is your take on that? And Member Richardson, you and Member Hodge are the youngest ones here, so probably we should hear from you, or you should giving your
I'll go
2 cents.
ahead. I'll go
Okay.
ahead. So I'll say this. When I decided to run, that was one of the questions I was asked. Do I feel whether status is more important, being that the Constitution is already happening? Like, this is the 6th constitutional attempt. So I feel that in terms of status, let's say that the Virgin Islands wants to be independent. I think the biggest thing would be around, is that what they want, and is that what they can accomplish? And I say that because if it is decided that the Virgin Islands wants to change their status, that would kind of defeat our roles in this process, because we're drafting a constitution that would align with the revised Organic Act. Whereas if the Virgin Islands decides they don't even want to be a part of the United States anymore, and we become independent, I don't think we would still have to work on a constitution that is based on the revised Organic Act. So that will kind of change how we work. That will change our ability to, I would say, create a document that is more independently written without staying in the confines of the revised Organic Act. But that's what I will share for now.
Okay, thank you. So you're saying if status comes first, then the 6th Constitutional Convention is moot.
Exactly.
Delegate Hodge, what do you think?
I see it from a different vantage point, right? I think no matter the question of status, the Virgin Islands needs a constitution. That's my stance, right? Because no matter if we're a part of the U.S. system or we're an independent nation, we have to have a document that governs the law, right? And if the Virgin Islands wakes up tomorrow and we have a populist uprising that says, we are now the independent Virgin Islands of the Caribbean, right? We will still need a document, right? And we will need something that we will be able to use as our ground fundamental structural law, right? Uh, we are, at this point over 100 years as a territory of the United States, and the revised Organic Act as our de facto constitution doesn't do the Virgin Islands a true justice. And this is why I myself put myself in this position to be a delegate to help draft a constitution and hopefully get the first constitution of the U.S. Virgin Islands submitted. Um, Status is a very interesting question because we have had plebiscites before, right? We have had these questions raised, and we have historically, as a territory, in those plebiscites, say that we would like to stay in the same status that we currently have, right? So it is very interesting, but I think the priority would be get a constitution, right? And then after the constitution, then we can have those much deeper conversations about status, because status is not just saying that we're independent. Status also means how are we going to navigate this global playing field, right? Or how are we going to be navigating becoming more intertwined with the United States, going from a unincorporated territory to an incorporated territory to a state, and so forth and so on, if we go that path, because there are multiple different paths when you consider the question of status.
Uh, in some of the conversations I've had over the last 20 years, I think the point that was always being raised is because we get so many federal funds, and because federal funds are whatever taxes are collected stays in the Virgin Islands, how would whatever status we get that's not unincorporated territory status like we have now, how would that affect us? And we know that during COVID, we got a plethora of money coming into the Virgin Islands that it seemed like it was just a big free for all because it was a lot of money that came in. And as a result, those of us who are keeping up with things know that we had persons who made up businesses and applied for money and got monies. Those of us who had businesses that applied did not get funding, and we had a lot of money, like the old people say, money knocking dog, and because of that, that's something that was always brought up in the last 20 years when we spoke about status. Whenever I was in the company of anybody and we were discussing status, it was, so what are we going to do about the money? How will we supplement that money that we're accustomed to get because of the federal government? Well, because also we know that things have changed a lot in the last 100 days since we have a new administration. So that probably is a little bit mute now, but it's still a consideration regarding. And I agree with Akima, and I agree with you too, Rudel, that it's something that needs to be discussed and moved out of the way so that we continue on doing what we're supposed to be doing. And I notice, especially though, when we have our meetings on St. John, that always comes up, always, 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 about the status and that and the ancestral and native Virgin Islanders. Delegate Carrington, are you back on?
I am back on. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, my take on this topic is this. I believe in the fifth and the fourth, in the preamble, there was language that spoke to status, in as much as it acknowledged the fact that we are not independent, that we are a colonial possession. I think that we need to make sure that we have similar language in our preamble to let the whole world know that we acknowledge that we are not an independent people, and that we that we're not, how to say this, we're not a people that aspires to be content with our current status. And so that language has to be crafted really artfully, I think. But I think that we must have language in there letting people know that we acknowledge that we are cognizant of our dependent status, and that it's not something that we ignore, and it's not something that we aspire to remain as. And that's my take.
Okay. Member Delegate Hendricks.
And Delegate Wells, I was informed that someone by the name of Malik, possibly Mr. Siku, is
Yes,
trying
he's
to
coming.
join.
We're doing it right now. Thank you so
Okay,
much,
no
Delegate.
problem.
Member Delegate Hendricks, are you able to hear us, or type something in the chat so I can see where you are? Well, that's very interesting. It's an interesting take because I hope that probably in the last few minutes of this meeting, or probably our next meeting, which is June, if we can all the members of this committee can jot down or send to me or something examples of what we would like to say in our preamble, so that we can have it to our executive committee by June, which is, oh boy, this is in a few weeks, because we all have certain ideas of what we'd like to see. And then I guess the executive committee will just make all of the suggestions available to us. And we would, in fact, it's like taking pieces of dough and then making it into one bread. And so I'd like for us, either if we have last 10 minutes of this meeting, or next, or beginning of our next um, session, which would be June 10th, if we could use that time to concentrate on what we would like to see as a preamble. And I really want to thank you, Delegate Hodge, for the um, the reminder, the reminder of that, because you're correct. We would like to have that done so we could get that off and then continue on with the other articles. Um, I noticed that we're waiting for Dr. Sekou to come on, so I'm just going on with the other article. Article 15 speaks about the protection of our environment. And I know there's another committee that's dealing with environment also, but I note, and it galls me, that on the waterfront in St. Thomas, there's manganiel tree decorating the waterfront. And I know from my limited knowledge of trees and foliage and fauna, manganiel tree is very poisonous. I thought of writing to the Senate president and asking him about that, but then I thought we used to have a beautification program with Agnes King, and that's probably a lot before a lot of you. That's a long time before a lot of you are around. But somebody in public works or something should know that that type of tree isn't conducive to where it is. We have a lot of persons, local persons, I see going there and taking pictures for their Facebook. And of course, we sometimes have the tourists who want to take a stroll along the promenade and walk down to downtown. And those trees are very, very poisonous. And that's something that I would like to bring forward to President Milton Pot. And I guess he would just put it out to whomever else could do something with it. So I just wanted to say that because I know that manganiel trees are poisonous. And I knew that from the time I was knee-high to a grasshopper and going to Cookie Point before it was even the big thing that it is now. So that's something I had in mind to say, and I'm glad I'm saying it. But do we have anybody on before I let Dr. Sekou begin who knows about the manganiel tree and its properties? Anybody? Okay. That's something we could probably research somewhat. Good evening, Dr. Sekou. Welcome.
We were trying to get in. I did not know I was doing wrong, so she had to help me to get in.
I'm so glad you got in.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to avoid anyone because this is the most important discussion, I believe, for this month of May. And I was told it is good to keep the camera off to get the best volume. So if you hear me keep asking, can you hear me? Is for me to make sure that I'm clear.
I'm hearing you very well. How about the other delegates? Can you hear?
I can
Other
hear him.
persons in
I can hear him
attendance can
clearly.
hear?
Clearly, I can hear him clearly.
Yes, clearly.
Okay, great.
Well, I had my dinner, so I'm full of energy. And as a real Centomian, sometimes we don't pronounce our words the way Crucians pronounce their words. And if Mr. Silverman is around, he might even find my Centomian accent hard in his St. Johnian ears. But I'm pleased that you invited me. I'll call you Miss Wells. I consider you part of my family because I have a St. John connection, just like you do.
All right.
You invited me to talk about the three issues that I believe address the soul of the Virgin Islands. I believe that the way these issues were addressed were not wise. There were issues in the fifth draft that tied to the questions of identity and peoplehood. The one issue on culture is the easy one. Article 14 is easy. That's not a hard one to resolve. The only thing we'll have to do is to massage the language so it wouldn't cause undue skepticism. But the issue of defining Virgin Islanders is a tough issue.
Yes.
I I had informed you, Ms. Wells, that I urged the entire Sixth Constitutional Convention to read the Department of Justice report, because the report took issue with the manner in which that topic was addressed. And I'll break it in two parts. Let's deal with what the federal government said, and then I'll deal with what I think is more appropriate. The federal government in 2009, 2010, during the Barack Obama administration, Joe Biden administration rather, Barack Biden administration, its Attorney General or its Department of Justice examined the draft, and they found 9 areas of concern. Of the 9 areas of concern, 6 are easy. They're not big problems. But the one that caused them the most concern was the way in which the delegates addressed the issue of Virgin Islanders. If you read the article closely, Article 2, I think it's Article 2 or Article 3, it makes distinctions based on ancestral ties and residency. And in the Department of Justice analysis, it took issue with it, and it said that the way, in essence, the American government approaches indigenous, is based on the Indian Commerce Clause. And I don't think that many of the delegates understand that from the United States point of view, when you say the word indigenous, they're thinking about the people who predate 1492, the different peoples that live here. And they use that principle as a way of defining the people who have been here for thousands of years, and they may not necessarily live in a specific state, but they live in a continent. So the way the language was drafted, it stated that if your ancestors were here before June of 1932, you were an ancestral native based on simply your presence in a territory before a certain time. Then it makes another distinction of native Virgin Islanders, stating that if you are there afterwards but born there, you are another classification. And it doesn't say Virgin Islanders, but it implies that Virgin Islanders are people who live here regularly, but they're not necessarily native, ancestral natives. So if you read the Department of Justice analysis, it has an issue with that, because according to U.S. laws, that's a problem. It goes a step further and say this ancestral native designation allows for a specific qualification mandated for lieutenant governor and governor. So it means that in the next section, if Malik Sugu wants to run for governor, he would have to be an ancestral or native Virgin Islander who would have lived here for 10 years, actually voted for 10 years and, lived for 15 years, which the Department of Justice says that's excessive. There's no place under the American flag where a governor has to live in any state or territory beyond 5 years. So those are the two issues that they brought to attention. And further on into the document, it makes reference to the fact that only native and ancestral native Virginians could be involved in political status vote. That's another issue that it considers too restrictive and a violation of the Equal Protection Clause, Amendment 14. So those are the issues I think that the delegates will have to be aware of. You should read that Department of Justice report to get that sense of it. Now I speak for my view now. My view is I happen to be one of those Virgin Islanders whose my paternal roots run deep in the Virgin Islands. So I know where I stand in terms of my heritage. I don't need any document to define me. My family been here for 13 generations, so I know who I am. I think it is dangerous for this convention to get caught up with an unnecessary conflict. I think it's wise to have a broad definition of Virgin Islanders, here in a constitution as broad, and then at a further date, if you want to have a commission that deals with issues of native rights, that's a separate commission. That's a commission where you look for people who claim native ties here, and you resolve that in a different commission. Make it something that it's a commission, people who want to deal with land in St. John, like my cousins in St. John, or property in St. Croix or St. Thomas, issues of culture. Let that be a specific commission that deals specifically with native rights. Let them define themselves and make up the mind on how to define that. That's a separate issue. But for the sake of this sixth constitution, it is wise to have the broadest definition for Virgin Islander, because we are here right now. The issue of political status, again, in the Guam, rather the Davis versus Guam case that was heard in 2019. That's after this fifth convention had this draft. It stated that the federal government will not uphold a native veto over political status. Where that come from? In Guam, a person in Guam, I think a continental guy, opposed the provision in the Guam proposed constitution that says only Chamorros can vote on political status. So he took the Guam commission and government to court, and he won. And the federal government says no commission in Guam, or by extension the rest of the territories, can create a veto provision for native people. So I would say that part of the draft document that has to be removed also, because that's federal law. What else? I know, back to the issue of culture. Well, that's the easy part. I mean, yes, we should have a commission on culture, Cultural Heritage Institute. Anything that deals with culture and heritage, yes, but it needs to be, this entity needs to be tweaked in a way that it is as inclusive as possible. At the same token, it preserves the very overwhelmingly strong African Caribbean presence in our culture. So I hope I said everything. Any questions?
I'm sure you'll hear some more. Just hold on a minute. Anybody can just come on in, question. Delegate Hodge,
It's not really a question. It was just a comment. Dr. Sekou went through the Department of Justice grievances in their report, and he was making the reference to ancestral and native. And I just wanted to make the distinction that it's not necessarily those definitions are issues, because those definitions are mentioned in the treaty between Denmark and the United States for the sale of the territories, right? It's the application of those definitions of a given special rights and privileges, which is, absolute no on the equal protections of the U.S. Constitution, which, again, we are not independent state or territory. We are a territory of the United States, so we have to abide by those U.S. constitutional rules and regulations, right? So I just wanted to make that very, very clear that, again, it's not necessarily the definitions that are the issue. It was the application of those definitions, such as no property tax. The governor had to be an ancestral native Virgin Islander who lived here for X amount of years, so forth and so on. And that will be the issue that we have to be very mindful and make sure we erase or eradicate from the sixth constitutional draft to withstand constitutional muster.
Attorney Hodge, can I respond to you? I think the two Delegate Hodges, the other one is not attorney. That's Stedman, is the other one. He's not here. Attorney Hodge, I may differ a bit with what you just said. The treaty that I heard everybody talk about, I've read it like 15 times. It uses the term inhabitants. It doesn't use the term ancestral native Virgin Islanders. The treaty doesn't even speak about the Virgin Islands people per se. I notice, and I hate so like a wordsmithing, but I'm hearing people using some terms that are not accurate. The United States federal government has written over 368 treaties with Native Americans. In each treaty, they specifically call it the tribal name out. They're very clear on when they talk about natives, who they mean. When it comes to territories, they have a different template. The template the United States has had with its unincorporated territories is they use terms like inhabitants on purpose, not only for the legal but also for the political reason. That it's a generic term that means who all here are considered inhabitants. They do not get into an issue in any of these transfer treaties, whether it's the Puerto Rico, the Treaty of Cession, Samoa, the Treaty of whatever it was, the capitulation agreement, Northern Marianas, the covenant. They make it broad, and then afterwards, then they would start to make distinctions. Like, for instance, for Guam, the Chamorro people, who are considered indigenous, but there were people who were there at a transfer. In Guam, who were Spanish and also Filipino. They were not considered natives because they happened to be at a transfer. So I noticed there's a public discourse in the VI where some of the people are using terms too loosely, and they don't understand that these terms don't quite mean what I think it means. So in our case, in a transfer in 1917, the inhabitants here included people who were native born, those who had come here and resident, and those who were transient, and those who were permanent residents, but they were from Denmark or other European countries who were just here because they had government jobs. And the period afterwards was a year for those who were transient to leave and go back to where they came from. But the majority who stayed became U.S. citizens, and they are considered Virgin Islanders. So, if this is the terminology we're using, that you're inhabitant and you're here to transfer, then it does not connotate an ethnic group. It does connotate that you happen to be here, because the people who are here transfer mainly African, but also included Frenchies, some Europeans, some Jewish people, one or two little Asian, but the majority were African Caribbean. It doesn't mean what people are using it to mean. So I would say the ancestral native Virgin Islander term is a little bit problematic, and I know I agree with you. And it was used now as the basis for qualification for leadership. So I'm agreeing, and we're not discussing it today. I hope not, but also allow for property tax exemption. So there were some people in the last convention who believed that being an ancestral native or native Virgin Islander ought to give a person special privileges, and that's where the Department of Justice had a concern with what you said, Mr. Attorney Hodge, the extra privileges that were sought.
Yeah. So yeah, again, so that, as you mentioned, it's not necessarily the definition that is an issue. It's the application, right?
That's
because
correct.
Ancestral has a definition, right? Virgin Islander has a definition, right? Those words are, as you read them, they have a meaning, right? We set the fifth did set a time frame that was before transfer, but it's not necessarily those definitions that are in conflict. It's the application of those definitions of giving special rights and privileges. But if this convention decides they don't want any definition of Virgin Islander in there except a resident Virgin Islander, right? So be it.
Well, I thank you very much, Professor Sakud. Now, I'd like to ask a question, because I read today on NPR or something that President 92nd is trying to, and correct me or steer me correctly here now, and I'm going to put it in layman's terms because that's how I understood it. If I was a resident of New Hampshire and I was a green card holder and whatever, and then I had a child that was born in New Hampshire, that child, because of whatever, he doesn't want them to be considered a United States citizen. Am I reading this correctly? And how does that affect us?
Now you took it to the difficult task. Oh, Lord, I was doing good until you asked this question. But let me say this, sir. I gotta pick my words carefully about this because I notice some people get very touchy when you criticize the president. I totally oppose the Republican posture on immigration. Period. I don't support it. I also totally oppose the way this birthright citizenship issue is now weaponized. It's weaponized. We in the territories have to pay attention to how this is playing out because I don't think our people understand that whenever there's a discussion of citizenship, by implication, the territories are in the crosshairs because we're not, the territories as entities are not considered states. We're not permanent parts of the United States. And once the mainland, the metropole begin to question who among them, even in the states, are citizens, by implication, we are included. So we can't just ignore the way the American policy has been for a long time. If you're born in the United States, you're a U.S. citizen, as far as you're concerned, it's the end of the discussion. I don't care if your parents come in by hook or by crook. So what? To me, it doesn't matter because if I take the posture of a Native American will say all Europeans came by hook or by crook. If I took a position of an Apache or Iroquois, the whole country is illegal. So my view is, this discussion, I oppose it in total. I don't care if the parents came in through the back door by canoe, helicopter. Once the child is born in American territory, child is American, and that's the end of it.
Let's hear some other comments on that. Delegate Member Carrington, Delegate Member Richardson.
I will let anyone go who has feedback for now, but I did have a prior question for Dr. Siku.
Well, you can ask that now. We can always get back to, we'll hold a thought about.
Right,
Yeah.
citizenship. Okay. So my good night, Dr. Siku. This is Delegate Richardson.
Yes.
And my question for you, I forgot the ethnicity of the individual who proved that his ethnic group was deliberately excluded from the government processes in Guam. But my question is, did he manage to successfully sue Guam because Guam was in violation of their own code? Or did he successfully sue Guam because the exclusionary practice was proven to be illegal? Like in terms of discrimination.
If I understand the Davis case, I think you're referring to the Davis case. The Davis case took issue with the way the draft Commonwealth Constitution, as well as the provision that only indigenous Chamorros have the right to vote for political status. The U.S. system, as of this day, says all U.S. citizens have the same right to vote everywhere. Now, the irony is that though they say that we can't vote for the president, that's a different issue. But in terms of any question of self-determination, is open to all registered voters who are, by definition, U.S. citizens. And that's an ironclad principle based upon the 14th Amendment, the so-called Equal Protection Clause.
So basically, he proved that his group was
Excluded.
being singled out in
Yes.
proof of, the constitutional. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Then the Delegate Carrington, or
I'm listening to the discussion. It's interesting, and it can be provocative for some people. I want to say a couple of things. Number one, I agree with Delegate Hodge that the definitions themselves are not problematic. Some may may be opposed to those definitions being in a document, but I think that the Department of Justice legal opinion posture was that the application of those definitions, the use of those definitions to give special privileges to people who fall under those definitions was in and of itself, problematic as violative of equal protection. And so that's my understanding of the DOJ memo, which I have read. But secondly, and I think more importantly, if I'm not mistaken, the citizenship of Virgin Islanders, when initially given, I believe in 1936,
1927.
1927, I'm sorry,
Mm.
was based on a congressional pronouncement. Am I right,
Yes,
Mike?
yes, that's correct.
So what the Congress gives, the Congress can take away.
In principle, yes.
Yes.
Yes, in principle. By
And
definition,
so
yes.
and so that our citizenship status is I'll use the best the word I could use is not constitutionally guaranteed.
Mm.
It's statutorily guaranteed,
Mhm,
but statutes can be repealed.
mhm.
And I do agree with you, Dr. Sekou, that we need to be very, very cognizant and at the same time very weary of this discussion that is being had in under this administration regarding who is a citizen and who is not or who should not. It has major implications
Us.
for us down here. Yeah.
And Attorney Carrington, let me add, and you know, you I think there are 4 attorneys on this convention. I'm not an attorney. I'm a lowly professor of political science. Lowly. There are 2 instances in which what you just said happened in the Philippines in 1934. Congress enacted a process of transitioning from unincorporated territory towards autonomy, 1934. And in the laws, they told them there was a date certain. Anybody born after this date will not have any ties to the United States. Those who were there from before had maybe American nationality. They could travel to live in Guam, Hawaii, but everybody afterwards, and it was phased out. The same with the Panama Canal zone was once a U.S. territory. In the Omar Torrijos Jimmy Carter agreement, the same thing happened. It was passed in 1978, the agreement, but they told each side agreed that at a distant time, at year 2000, anyone born after that time, I think, cannot be guaranteed U.S. citizenship. And so many Panamanians went to the States who wanted to be American citizens who were in the Panama Canal zone. You understand? So that's the same fact, the same principle just enunciated, that Congress gave them U.S. nationality, partial citizenship, U.S. took it back. The same applies now, and I don't want to sound like I'm anti-Trump, but it's not beyond Trump's wherewithal to decide to eliminate all 5 territories if you so desire, because the way he's operating, he seems to have the posture that they can do this at will. So it's that far-fetched at all.
So, question, well, we know that we have a passport and we can travel, well, we could have until whatever is happening, wherever we wanted to go. If we wanted to vote for, like a lot of persons wanted to vote for President Barack Obama, they left the Virgin Islands, gave up their voting rights, and then voted, and then came back to the Virgin Islands, and then re-registered to be a part of the Virgin Islands election system so they could vote. And you're saying, Dr. Sekou, that that's something that could be taken away from us by this president?
This president alone, the United States. But the United States, as of today, the U.S. as of today has taken a posture, not just legally but politically, that it is based upon 50 states, initially 13 states, but it has a mindset that the states are by themselves in a permanent marriage. And when some Confederate states wanted to break the marriage, they fought a war. That's a historical fact. The Northern Union forces defeated the South, saying this is a marriage where you cannot become divorced. So people in the 50 states have a permanent union and have permanent rights. The 10th Amendment says that all explicit powers not given to the federal government lies where? Lie with the states. But the United States had no intention of having unincorporated territories. We were not a part of their grand scheme of things. And if we last so long, given the Trump world, he may think we have lasted too long. So anything is possible. I don't want to say I'm fair mongering, but it is not far fetched that the Trump folks say they rather have Canada as a state, Greenland as a state, Panama Canal Zone back, and let the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico go about it very way. Because we don't have no need for the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. They could do that with ease. In fact, what I'm saying is, I've heard discussed when I was in graduate school, what Trump is doing in Canada was discussed in the 1990s. So I'm surprised how some of the mainstream press act as if he's crazy, but this is not a new discussion. He is sitting in a grotesque way, but it is not far-fetched that Trump takes what they call the Fortress America approach and decide he's only focusing on the 48 contiguous states and Canada, and to hell with these other islands to the south of Florida.
Oh,
I don't like that song you make.
And in that light, and I agree with Malik. I mean, I don't know if anybody remembers, but in his first term, Trump made a pronouncement. This Greenland thing is not something he just started speaking about. There was a pronouncement he made, I think, in his the second last year of his first term, where he said that we want Greenland and we'll trade it to Denmark for Puerto Rico.
That's
And
correct.
right?
That's
And
correct.
so the mentality is that we are expendable.
That's correct.
We can still be bought and sold. And I'm saying that in agreement with Malik, but more importantly, for us to make sure that when we write this sixth constitution, that we keep these things in mind and that we don't look at this document that we're creating as something that we're writing with aspiration for incorporation into the United States. We need to be writing this in a way that we can anticipate that our status may not be at some time in the future may not be incorporated at all. It may be as Attorney Hodge said, the Virgin Islands of the Caribbean, the independent Virgin Islands of the Caribbean. Now, we're not supposed to. Status is not something we're not supposed to discuss in this document. But I think, once again, I'll repeat it, that our preamble should be worded in such a way that we acknowledge our status, not accept our status, acknowledge the status, and have some language that speaks in some way to state that this is not something that we're content with.
Mhm. Well, I'll give a little history, and I'm agreeing with you. The Virgin Islands has enough people with the requisite brains and language skills to draft a document that can serve two purposes. Purpose one is to allow us to cross this one river, which is to have a framework for our government here, right now, as we live, to deal with the pressing issues of today. But in it should have an embryo that when the conditions change, and they will change, we're ready. It's like fighting, it's preparing for a fight. Like all boxers, before they prepare for a fight, they train. They have sparring partners. And if they're well advised, if I'm fighting a southpaw fighter, 5'10", 180 pounds, my sparring partner would fit his body type, and I prepare for that situation. So the same as us, we know that the direction of this current administration, as well as Democrats also too, that they're not going to be willing to be so generous with federal programs like they used to be, and that we will have to be able to stand on our own 2 feet. And whether they push us, chuck us off, hold our hands, whatever approach they use is secondary, but there is in front of our very eyes a gradual stepping back from the generosity. Therefore, it's wise for us to create a document that, in essence, has the framework that when the conditions change, we expanded some more. So I would say to everyone here, I don't believe in fear mongering. So if I speak to the public, I would not say that they're going to be an automatic imposition of anything. But it is not far-fetched. This is May 20th that this President could get one day decide to impose a financial control board and versions like what he did in Puerto Rico and claim that all the problems we're complaining about are grounds for him to intervene. And he could say that since you don't have a constitution of your own, we are showing a lack of maturity. So to me, it shows maturity to say we're going to make a positive step forward, but also let everybody know that this is only a step. We're not finished with this process. It's step by step. So that's my humble response to that, Attorney Carrington.
Any other delegate who would like to weigh in, or I'll open it for discussion from persons who might be in the waiting room who are just online. Is Peter online? I'm hearing mumbling, but I'm not sure what is being said. I didn't see member delegate Hendricks again. I don't know if she's having. Oh, there you are. Welcome. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, this is Peter Myers. Are you speaking to me?
Yes. Would you like to weigh in on? I know you're been waiting. Would you like to weigh in and offer some suggestions or comments?
Yes, I would. If
Right
I may.
ahead. Yes, you may.
I find myself in agreement with many of the speakers. Thank you. First, thank you very much for letting me speak. I
You're
feel
welcome.
very honored to be able to participate in this very important effort that you're making to create a constitution. My own view is that the Virgin Islands should pursue a effort to become more independent. I believe that self-sufficiency should be a primary objective. I think the idea that we can depend on the federal government to, support us and to take care of us. These federal funds can be cut off, at a moment's notice. My own term that I use is devolution. Used it before, but devolution is basically the assumption of certain rights and certain authorities and certain actions by a smaller, a local government. Am I causing feedback? Sorry. I think that the goals of the Constitution should be to set up a system that's self-sufficient, and that to me means creating a population that is actively engaged. That means a good education. I also think that the government has to be empowered to do the things that it has to do, create the infrastructure to help with all the infrastructure, including healthcare and power. We have such, I don't want to drift too much, but there's so many opportunities here. We have so many natural resources in the Virgin Islands for using renewable energy. There's light and wind, and there's ocean thermal electric. We just have so many opportunities. I think independence independence of energy generation is important. On a slightly different topic, if I may, I'd like to say that I believe very much that all individuals should be treated the same. I think group rights are a mistake. I think anytime one group is given rights that others don't have, that group, that builds resentment. It builds us versus them kind of a mentality. So my own feeling is that there should not be any provision in the Constitution that treats people differently, except that if a person behaves in some way that they behave themselves. In other words, you could have a residency requirement, for example. People have to live on the island for a certain time. Maybe they're treated differently than newcomers. Maybe people who pay taxes are treated differently than people who don't pay taxes. But I think to go back into the ancestry, I would not be in favor of that. Thank you for letting me speak. I very much appreciate it. I feel honored that you've let me speak at all. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Delegate Rudel Hodge.
Yeah, so going back to the previous conversation, just talking about just the global climate, right? We are in very, very interesting times, right? Like extremely interesting times when you really look at the global scale of things, right? There is wars that are being happening all over the Middle East and even in Africa that are not being discussed in the ways that they should be. There are, the U.S. trying to get into in my opinion, like a Tokugawa isolationist type of society where it's just keeping as much of America together and pushing anything outside of America to the wayfarer, right? And I think I echo the statements of both Dr. Sekou and Delegate Carrington, in the sense that this document needs to be drafted in the way that affords the Virgin Islands as many options as possible, because we are not at a place right now to select one path, right? But we need to be able to draft a document that allows us to navigate any path down the road that makes sense for the Virgin Islands. This document cannot be, leaning too far left, too far right. It does need to find a balance where we can navigate in a variety of different ways as the collective Virgin Islands conscious comes alive. Because unfortunately, the Virgin Islands of yesterday and the Virgin Islands of today is two different Virgin Islands, right? We have faced COVID. We have faced two major Category 5 hurricanes that have displaced a lot of our population, and then we also have a very unique, I won't say issue, but a unique case where, because we are a U.S. territory in the Caribbean that is one majority descendants of African Americans and English speakers, we are a prime location for anybody with the means, all right, to immigrate to, all right? Thus creating this, somebody told me that we're not using the term melting pot, but we are a fruit basket of different people, all right? So it is very important that we look at this document and really think about all the implications of our words, all the implications of our actions, to make sure that we do have a document that allows us to pivot, because there is going to be a lot of pivoting in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years when we really understand just the global structure of things.
Can I say something?
Dr. Sekou?
Yeah. This is impressive. Mr. Myers, I kind of agree with 80% of what you said, but the last part, I have a different way of seeing it, and I'll tell you why. I don't know how group rights is perceived outside of the Virgin Islands, but I'm 61 years old, and I've come to see how if you don't put some things in laws, the Virgin Islands will lose its characters of people. We're in a bind. That I believe in inclusion, a cosmopolitan Virgin Islands, but there's some things you're gonna have to lay out. For instance, as an example, I'm a St. Johnian side of my family, and then the national park controls the majority of the land. And it causes those St. Johnians whose ties are deepest there to leave. It's impossible to really benefit from what you've inherited from your ancestors. And the way the laws are, the so-called free market, you are at a disadvantage. And in my family, my specific subclan, we've lost everything. And I don't think that's fair. That's almost genocide. That you're from there, you want to develop your property, but the way it plays out in the real world, not on paper. So when we speak about group rights, it is not to oppress someone, but it's how do you preserve vulnerable people who, because of the nature of the society, they're going to lose. They cannot win because the cards are stacked against them. So I think for those who are speaking about the native rights, I believe that could be the motivation. But the problem is, you know, the cure cannot kill the patient. Whatever solutions that we take up cannot be a toxic solution. It has to be a solution that the entire public can see. We're trying to protect people who are disadvantaged. So you know, the group rights issue, if it means protecting those who are vulnerable, yes. But those who have money and power, they don't need it. They don't need group rights. They're already okay. The elites don't need group rights. The people who need group rights are those who are poor and disadvantaged. So I'm kind of see it in a different way. I understand what you're saying, because group rights also can be weaponized and become a source of oppression. So I know the other side of that equation too. So that's why I see things a little differently from you, Peter.
If I may add to the discussion,
Yes, you may.
I think that the what's the word I'm looking for, the restriction, not the restriction, but the the mentality that we are constricted by is the American mentality that speaks to conquering, and I don't mean it in a negative sense, but the whole uh, the whole idea of westward we go, and we incorporate new lands, and we take our civilization and culture from coast to coast, and I'm just using that as illustrative of a type of mentality that is more European or American European than uh, than what we're accustomed to here. Quite clearly, we have finite land space here. St. Croix is only 84 square miles. St. Thomas, I believe, is 32. St. John, 28.
No, 20. You give us 8 more, 20.
20, 23.
20.
But my point is the mentality that says we can, that a certain group of people can travel anywhere they want, buy up finite land space, and leave none for the people who are from or of that certain place. It seems to me to be that mentality befuddles me, so that my children, when they want to be able to have a piece of this place where the roots lie long, are not able to do so because our status does not allow us, as other countries do, to control who comes, who goes, how long they stay. It seems to be that that model doesn't fit well for preserving something for my kids and Malik's kids and Rudel's kids. And so it, it, it that's a problem for me. That's a real problem for me that I can't at this juncture feel guaranteed that my offspring and their offspring and their offspring will be able to have something here. Just a thought.
May I comment?
Peter?
Sure.
Uh, Thank you, sir. Yes, I very much sympathize with your point of view. I don't have a perfect solution, but I will offer this. I feel like people who are living here and who have a history here and have dedicated a commitment to the Virgin Islands should be treated differently than people who are newcomers or people who come in. Um, I'll offer one idea, and that's one suggestion is I will tell you from having lived in the States that the property taxes in the Virgin Islands are very low and compared to other places. And I think it is not unreasonable to have people who come in from the outside pay significantly higher property taxes. In other words, if someone comes in and they buy a home and they're not a citizen, or maybe they've only been here a short time, there should be some period of residency, they are paying some higher fraction. Maybe it's twice, maybe it's three times, but a significantly higher property tax. That does two things. One is it offers some protection for the people that live here and grown here and have shown a dedication, but it also gives more money to the government. And I think that goes towards self-sufficiency. If the government is collecting more money, then we're less dependent on the federal government for funds. So it's just a partial idea, but that's my thought. Thank you for letting me speak.
Yeah, and the term that I was trying to, the term that crystallizes what I was speaking about is that whole idea of manifest destiny. I'm sure, Peter, that you've heard that term and understand what it means. And
Yes.
I think that that a lot of people still harbor that mentality that any place you go is a place for you to conquer, so to speak. What is that?
Delegate.
What does that leave for? What does that leave for the people who don't have that mentality?
Good evening, Delegate Daniel. Delegate Richardson, you were saying something?
Yes, I was going to request the floor, Delegate Wells.
All right, go right ahead. And then
So,
Delegate Daniel would like to speak. And then Gerald Emmanuel. Oh, hi, how are you?
so Delegate Carrington, not to minimize what you're saying, but I think that one privilege of being a Virgin Islander is having maybe not fully equal rights to that of a US citizen, but we can go to any state in America and purchase land, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that if any of our senators were to create legislation that prevents certain groups of maybe US citizens or non local citizens from buying locally, whether that be land or, you know, land in the how to say, land for commercial purposes. I think that can be looked at as, you can say, well, it excludes those groups specifically. So I'm wondering, Delegate Carrington, what would you propose be put in place to minimize those chances of Virgin Islanders not having the potential for these benefits that you speak of?
I when I became a part of this convention, I was somewhat torn because I think that I I think that this is a process, and this is an exercise in self determination And self-determination means what the words say. You yourself determines your destiny. And the fact that we are constricted in what we can do, what we can write on this in this document by parameters from a foreign power that we are not, we don't have full rights uh, within that power, uh, left me conflicted. I have I decided to join anyway because somebody said to me the other day, listen, it's better we be at the table than not be at the table. But I'm saying all that to say is that I'm not suggesting at all that that at this present juncture where we're a colony where we are constricted in what we can write by that foreign power that we write something in this constitution that restricts people's ability to buy land. I'm not suggesting that at all. But I've always said that my participation here is to write a document that anticipates when we are able to fully and truly self-determine. So I hope I've answered your question, Akima.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Daniel? Hello? All right, we're going to go with
I'm eager to say something. Can I say something? What makes the Virgin Islands complex is this is the only U.S. territory where the people who can say they're from here are also descendants of people who were brought here. We're not a group of Taínos or Caribs per se, and most of us have African origin. So we have an ancestral tie to Africa, but also we have a tie to the Virgin Islands and the rest of the Caribbean. So when we get into discussion on self-determination and identity, it's more complex. And I think the difficult task is that we're not tribal, but we're clannish. We have a clannishness so that an outsider coming to the VI will quickly observe that there are three societies: St. Thomian, St. Jonian, and Crucian. My Crucian brethren think St. John and St. Thomas is one society, two societies, two sets of people. And within each people, there's subdivisions. So it seems like when we get into discussion on how to deal with these issues, a little more complex than people think. Now, in the case of St. John, there has to be some kind of protection of native land because most of the island is a national park. It's imposed on St. Jonians. And there has to be something in the Constitution that says, in a specific case of St. John, there has to be a specific land commission or something that addresses the peculiar needs of native St. Jonians because it's just reality. St. Croix doesn't have the same problem as St. John, and St. Thomas has the same problem as St. John. So I think you have to show a kind of sophistication that you anticipate that these issues are going to reemerge very soon.
well, I agree with that, especially as we see more development going to the outlying keys like Luangwa and those other keys. And of course, the property taxes is astronomical when you build a big facility right next to some ancestral property. But I'm going to go to Delegate Daniel. I couldn't hear you before. No, I still can't hear you.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Now we can. Yes, welcome.
Okay, so thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. What a fascinating conversation this evening. And I've missed parts here and there, so I do apologize if this is redundant. In the conversation about rights for certain groups, I want to echo what Dr. Sekou and Delegate Carrington have been saying and just crystallize it in. For 532 years, we have been systematically disadvantaged in the game of global capitalism. Right. And so we are not talking about carving out specific rights to give us an unjust advantage. A conversation about restorative justice. And if Virgin Islanders are to be able to compete in the global market, in our home with the lack of resources and continued structural oppression that we face, there have to be certain carve outs that allow us to sustain, or as Dr. Sekou said, the Virgin Islands as we know it will not exist anymore. And so to Devin's point, I don't think any of us are looking at this in the conqueror sense of we deserve more. And I'll speak for myself, when I think about special even privileges for groups, it is truly through the mission of justice and the process of equity so that we can be self-sufficient and can be competitive in the global market. But if we were to play by the rules of the oppressor, we will continue to lose. And so I'm hoping, and it sounds like the conversation that we're having here is that most of the delegates, at least on this call, are willing to be creative about what a just future for Virgin Islanders through the current colonial context, and then hopefully through different visions of where we can go in the future, that we can be creative in this iteration of drafting to allow ourselves the best fighting chance as a people that are systemically oppressed and have been for at least 532 years. So that's what I wanted to add to the conversation, and I appreciate the time, Delegate Wells.
Thank you very much, Delegate Daniel. Mr. Jean Emmanuel?
No, Gerard. Gerard
This is
Emmanuel.
Gerard, I'm sorry,
If
Gerard.
he ain't talking to, we in trouble. Yeah.
That's true. Well, he's talking to us through this conversation. I'm sorry, Gerard. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, this is one of the most, I don't know, this is one of the best conversations, most intelligent conversations I've heard in a long, long time. And I want to say that with respect to status, because we intertwining status and constitution in a sense. But I want to say that if you look at the draft of the 5th Constitutional Convention, Article 17 makes provisions for some of the things that we're discussing now. There are things that are more appropriately discussed when we deal with our political status. The Constitution can accommodate some of the things that we're discussing now, but basically this Constitution is just to really develop our internal government and governance procedures, institutions, etc. Okay. The status will be the most appropriate area for us to address some of the things that we're discussing now. And I'm glad that we have diverse opinions and diverse views. And what I like about the discussion is we're really respectful. Dr. Sekou was very respectful. Mr. Carrington was very respectful. The gentleman who talked about land, he was very respectful. And I think that this bodes well for the process right now. But I just want to end by saying some of the things, we have to be careful because some of the things that we're talking about really should come when we discuss our political status.
Well, one of the questions I asked earlier, and this meeting is being preserved, so you can get on anytime and review it. When we've met on St. John in particular, I mentioned this, 2 things came up most of the time to all of the standing committee meetings that I've attended and other meetings in the community was, and Malika already made a good description of the difference between the ancestral and native Virgin Islanders. That's one thing that came up. And the other thing was, shouldn't we be discussing status prior to doing the Constitution? Those are 2, and I've said for the last 20 years or more, those are the 2 items, no matter what kind of meeting I go to, I attend, or I chair on St. John, those are the 2 most particular points that are foremost in the majority of the attendees' brains. So I'm glad that you said that, Gerard, because I've been to some meetings with you also, and the same thing came up again.
Well, I don't think it's a difficult issue. I mean, we could do both, we could discuss status now, or we could deal with the Constitution alone. You're right. Status issues will always come up, but I think that it can create a kind of a distraction, unintended distraction. But all the points that were mentioned are very relevant and very, I agree with them. However, I look at the Constitution as a way to tighten up on our internal government. And my basic issue my basic desire for this Constitution, and I've discussed this with Delegate Carrington and Dr. Siku already, is to create a system of government that empowers the people a whole lot more than what we have now. And that has nothing to do with political status. For example, we have an attorney general that's appointed by the governor. Why? The governor has he or she has their own attorneys. I would like the Constitution to create an attorney general that's elected by the people and that can be removed by the people. The same thing with inspector general, even a judge. These are things that are not novel or radical. You have this in the states, and Attorney Carrington, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's several states that have elected judges, elected attorney generals. So this is my bias. I would like to see the document develop in a way where we look carefully at how governance and government are functioning now in the Virgin Islands. We complain a lot, but one of the ways that we can solve these things is to create a document that empowers the people more, that facilitates the process, not only of electing people, but removing them as well. Right now, it's almost impossible to remove anybody from office if they're doing the wrong thing. So I'll stop there.
Well, on our April 24th meeting, those are two items that were mentioned, and that's going to be crafted into our package that we're going to submit to the executive committee to have the Attorney General and the Inspector General elected. And if you'll recall, we had a referendum when we did have the question posed to the populace about electing the Attorney General, and that passed. Of course, nothing else happened after that, but the people were in favor of electing the Attorney General, especially because we know that the governor nominates the Attorney General, so then the Attorney General is the governor's attorney. Although, like you said, he can have his own attorney.
Ms. Wells.
Then I'm sorry, just on the other hand, now we know that the Attorney General's office is the office that by law is the one who supplies attorneys for the various government agencies. For example, the Board of Election. Of course, the last 10 years, we didn't have an attorney who was associated or named to the Board of Election for its meetings. Prior to that, we always had an attorney that would come and sit in and take information from the board. And if they weren't sure about the answers, they'll go back to their office and do that. In fact, Mac Davis, many of you might remember him, he was the attorney for the Board of Election for a number of years and did an excellent job, the late Mac Davis. Member Carrington?
No, I think it was Dr. Siku wanted to
Oh,
comment.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I sense in this discussion, and I hope this sense I have is reality in the Virgin, is that I think the topic of Constitution has ripened. That's the word we use in accounting, when we reach a point where there's at least some common understanding of where we have to go. And Gerard said it very eloquently that we need to have a sense of governance that comes out of a mature discussion, but also a better document that addresses our needs. And all of us know the problems of the VI, WAPA, VIA, whatever, police problem, potholes. And many of these problems are driven by local lack of governance. Our internal issues are driving half of the problem. Other half is our political status. Some of our issues are overlapping, status and local, but in terms of the local aspect, by us having a constitution that addresses areas to make us more productive, better governed, better governance, better self-governing is a step forward. And so even in the past couple of years, when I promoted the idea, or I agreed with the idea that we adopt the Revised Organic Act and its amendments, it is for us to take a step forward to get out of this morass. That's the fancy word, you know. or I use a local word, is strumu. We in.
True, yes.
Peter,
yes.
you know strumu is Peter? Strumu, we in a strumu. We in a strumu in the VI. Lord, we in a strumu. And the strumu is because of lack of good governance.
True.
And our people tend to pick on the individual governor senators as if they're the reasons, but it's the political system we have that's driving the poor governance. So, you know, when we say we need a good constitution, is motivated by a desire to have a document that reflects the best of what we have today and something better coming. Like we could make some tweaks if you have to, but and then even if it's a tweaked document, whatever document we decide upon, whether it's the Revised Organic Act or this thing revised, whatever it is, has to be able to pass constitutional muster.
Yes.
Go up the chain of command from the delegates to the governor to the Trump administration, Congress, come back to us, and we got to approve it.
Yes.
If we approve whatever is done, we would have made history. We would have finally crossed the Jordan's River, finally. But that's the task in front of us. Yeah.
Questions, comment? You know, this Struma, we understand that very well as we started off talking about what we say, what we don't say, like Coco Bip and Tapayas. That's my favorite one there, because it seems like if it's that one thing, it's the next thing coming at you, a whole heap of pan coming. Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback a bit on what Delegate Daniel said, and I just want to say this very simple thing. We here that are of our African descent, we who were brought here against our will, we were brought here, and when we were brought here, we were dispossessed of our land. In other words, we were taken from our land, and we could never get that back because, you know, we got the tech refund there. So my idea, and I'm just making this comment because it's been on my mind. My idea is that there's a term in the legal realm called constructive possession. So if me and Malik then a car and the police stop us and find a gun in the back seat, and both of us deny it belongs to us, there is a provisional law that says, well, both of you were in the car and both of you were in constructive possession of the gun. So both could be charged, okay? But anyway, I'm making that point to say that because our land was taken from us, where they brought us now becomes ours. We are in constructive possession of this land because it speaks to equity and justice, piggybacking on Delegate Daniel's sentiments. And so I just want, I mean, it does not necessarily, what I just said does not necessarily uh, uh, take us further down the road to passing a constitution that survives federal muster. But in this process, all these things weigh heavily on my mind. Um, we've been dispossessed, and we need to be able to possess something. And this land is what we should possess because we were brought here against our will. We were dispossessed of the land that we came from. But on top of that, we worked hard to make this land what it is. And so it's just a thought in my mind that I wanted to share.
But Attorney Carrington, the reason why that is a concept that's controversial is that's a philosophical posture that everybody in this hemisphere who didn't come consciously could use. And I think there's an aspect of it that is good and an aspect that is bad. I think it is wise to put that aside unto itself, like I was saying earlier, you create a native commission to deal with these difficult issues among the natives, to get consensus among the natives. Because right now, what makes the VI so unusual is that the native, using it in the sense that you're born here or your parent is born here, the natives have no consensus on who is native. There's nowhere else on the American flag in which the natives don't have a consensus on who they are. The Chamorros know who they are. The Samoans know who they are. Native Americans know who they are. Native Hawaiians know who they are. In Guam, Marianas, the two set of people, Carolinians and more Chamorros. So, but with us, we have that situation where, because of how our society evolved, it's a bit more complex. And I would say that's a discussion that needs to be held. And like Gerard was saying, perhaps in the context of political status and with a native commission, because that's a tough one. That's not an easy thing you're saying, because it implies that unless you come here as an African, you don't have a right to the Caribbean.
Yes, Delegate. Can I
Can
comment?
may I respond?
Go ahead.
I don't think it's a controversial prospect or position to take at all. I think that justice, equity dictates exactly what I'm saying. Now I understand that other people who were brought here against their will could make the same argument, and they should. They should. You can't let injustice be unaddressed. Now, I agree with you that what the position that I'm stating right now is not something that we can likely discuss at this juncture because of the colonial status that has been imposed upon us, and the dictates and the constraints that the feds have put on us regarding what we can write and what we can say. But I don't think that this concept that I've spoken of is controversial at all.
Can I respond to that?
That's Gerard. Yes, you
Yeah.
may.
Yeah, I don't think that Dr. Sekou was saying is controversial. It doesn't have any place. And I agree with you, Attorney Carrington. Remember Article 17 of the fifth draft makes a provision where we could put things in there so that the people could be reminded that when we pass this document, we will be discussing those issues. Our next step is to form a political status commission or an advisory commission to deal with these things. And I don't have a problem with them coming up in the discussion because they're very important. And I think that's the way to do it. You just have an Article 17 that makes the federal government know that we're not just satisfied with our Constitution. We have other important issues. And as soon as this document is passed, we're going to jump and create that commission to focus on those issues. Because the reality is the issues that Delegate Carrington is talking about are very fundamental issues. We could have all the constitutions we want, but if we don't deal with that issue at some point in the near future, the Constitution will be for naught. Because everybody could come in here and buy up all the land and put us out. So it's not that it's a bad issue, the timing is wrong. I just think there's a way to deal with it where we put it in an article like Article 17. I don't know if the convention has discussed that article yet. Y'all could clarify that for me.
Well, can I give a little?
Yeah.
I'm going to throw in a londo.
What?
A londo.
I'm not familiar with that word.
Take it in a different direction.
That's a crucial word, no.
That's a crucial word, no.
Nor St. Jonian.
I'll give you an example. I'll give an example. I grew up in St. Thomas, and one of my beloved teachers, his name was Mr. Provost. He came from the States. He would be phenotypically a white American, but he became so acculturated. When I was in junior high school, we used to call him a Frenchie because he spoke like us.
Yes.
And his sons were raised, then his sons are like everybody else. And so when I went to a funeral that I did for Mr. Henry Jackson, and to hear how the son spoke. I say now, he may not be an ancestral native, but because of how his family are cultivated, has salt in his bones. So when I see someone like him, I don't see him as an outsider or colonizer because of how he has acculturated. He has shown a love for the place. And so when I'm referring to Devin, is that I'm very careful not to make a mechanical assumption that if a person is not of the VI, cannot become of the VI. Because if and I'm not saying you're saying this, I'm not talking about anybody here, but I've heard in the past people take the posture in a mechanical way that if you cannot trace your roots here, you cannot become a part. And I think that was Peter is referring to, Peter Myers is referring to those who come here and become a part of the community, not as colonizers, not as Los Conquistadores, but come to be a part of the community. There's room for them if they come and they are part of us. And I recall telling someone that if you use a rigid definition of people in the Caribbean got to be from here, then Edward Siaga cannot be a Jamaican.
Well, Malik, may I respond? May I respond, please?
Yeah, we reason and talk.
Yeah. Gerard and I have had discussions in the past. In fact, there was a one pointed set in time when Gerard and I were on the same side of an argument regarding the fact that there are people who, under the definition, would not be considered native or ancestral native Virgin Islanders, but who have been here, have contributed so much, and ain't going nowhere. So I don't believe that I've expressed any rigidity with respect to people who I feel who should be considered part of us. But at the same time, we can't ignore that there are a set of people whose roots are so long in the soil that they should be recognized in some way, even by just having a simple definition.
Well, again, I don't want to dominate this, but as Tony Hodge or others say, the problem, and then even Peter with his own posture, the problem is that definition becoming weaponized. I'm not saying you are saying that, Devin. I'm saying, but there are some people in this community who will weaponize this issue. We got to be mindful that we don't walk in a trap here. We don't want to say we're trying to protect, people need to be protected, end up oppressing somebody else. We got to make sure whatever we say is clearly meant to preserve, protect, help those who are in a weaker position. There's some families here in St. Thomas who are so powerful. I don't want to call them names because I don't know who related to who in this meeting, but they don't need no help. There's some native Black families here in the Virgins who don't need no protection because they run in the place. They got the money, the land, they have everything. They don't need protection, but the people need protection. Those who are more humble in their finances and don't have the access to power. And so when you craft a constitution, you get saying something, whatever you write is meant to protect people and make sure that the people who don't need protection, don't worry about them. They can fend for themselves.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone, and especially you, Dr. Saku, for this robust discussion. We're going to meet again as the Standing Committee for Cultural Heritage on June 10th. We'll be meeting virtually again, 6 to 8, and you'll get the StreamYard link. And I hope that more people can be encouraged to come on and give their opinions still, because we're still gathering. What I'd like for the members, Delegate Carrington and Richardson, I don't see Ronald Russell, and any other delegate to pen, this is our homework, to pen your ideas of what this preamble that we should, that's what the first, because it'll be the first 15 minutes of our meeting, what it should look like, what it should sound like, so we can make one of all our ideas to be able to submit to the executive committee. That's the first thing we need to do. So our first 15 minutes on June 10th will go to that. And then I hope that everybody else could come back. Remember, StreamYard is the link. And I really want to thank all the persons, all the delegates who are here tonight. And we're going to do this with our collective minds. We're going to do this. So thank you so much. Have a great evening. And
may I say something, Ms. Wells?
yes, you may.
I have to be gracious. First, I thank the convention for inviting me. Be patient with me struggling with the IT. I'm a Geico caveman. I'm ancient. I really appreciated this discussion. Everyone here who spoke impressed me. And you know how the cities, these campaign ads say that my views don't represent the University of the Virgin Islands,
Yes.
the government of the Virgin Islands, not even all the Sekou people in my family. They're mine only based on my humble experience in this discussion. I hope I didn't offend anybody. I hope I didn't say anything that was out of the way. I hope I didn't sound too aggressive, because I've been told I'm a rough centurion at times. I leave the roughest for the Crucians. I hope what I said was useful. And you have a great evening and have a pleasant rest of the week.
You do the same. I'd like to thank my son, because it's because of him I'm able to get on and be able to do what I need to do, because I'm like you, no idea, but I'm learning. Thank you so much and have a good evening, everybody.
All right.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Good night.